proximity, and the rule can pretend to apply to the whole of life, and the whole of the way of living will present himself as a rule. It is both. It is the life which is a rule, and it is the rule which is life.
Maybe you will talk about this one, but what would
Allowed,
count
more
as
allowed.
a state of exception? What counts as a state of exception?
One could say that in some way they live in a state of exception. No? This kind of rule is not a normal rule. So the law usually does not apply to everything. In the state of exception, it is not that the law applies to everything, but as the law is suspended, everything can become object of the law. So we can draw, in this sense, there can be an analogy. No? When we have this phenomenon of law and life becoming almost coinciding, this can happen in the state of exception, because the state of exception, no actions which usually do not have any juridical meaning. I walk in the evening. What's wrong with walking in the evening? But if there is the coprifuoco, what do you say in English? Curfew. You walk in the evening, and the soldier kills you. So what happens in the state of exception? That there is an indetermination of life and law. In a different sense. Yes?
You began the lecture by saying that subjectivity and time go together, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said that Aristotle uses, what Aristotle has done is an apparatus to capture time.
Capture being.
Capture being. The way you presented it, it sounds like these two concepts have been friendly to each other.
And mean?
Friendly to each other. They
Friendly.
have been
Friendly.
Mm-hmm.
friendly to each other. Whereas
Time and subject, or
time and subjectivity. Whereas there is a very big imbalance between the two. Subjectivity is always out of time, out of joint, out of place. We are always chasing a moving train, like someone else said it. You know, it's an asymmetry between subjectivity and time. This apparatus to capture being and time, perhaps even these rules, do you think it's a response to this asymmetry, to this dialectic between subjectivity and time? Like, I think you say something similar to this in Infancy and History, that the book, about language, but this reminds me of the same thing Nietzsche said about us every time doing a useful error. We respond to our incapability to grasp time, perhaps, and flow of time. All these rules we have been talking about seem like something similar.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, but when I was speaking of subjectivity in this sense, I was speaking on the philosophical concept of subjectivity, and this I maintain that is, I think, always linked to time. But I understand if you mean by subject something different, a singular living being, which is not necessarily take the form of subjectivity, but if we speak of the subjectivity in Aristotelian sense, but also in Kantian sense, because Heidegger wrote a book on Kant, trying to show that the time in Kant has the form of a self-affection. So the self-affection is also the definition of the subjectivity. And so time, according to Heidegger, also in Kant, time and subjectivity go together. So that's why I was saying that, so I was speaking of subjectivity in the technical ontological sense, the sense that it has in philosophical tradition. But if you take subjectivity in another meaning, perhaps you are right. But anyway, I think you will have also, as we saw yesterday, you will have always difficulties in really separating the idea of subjectivity from time. How can you do it? Why you say that there is no...
I think subjectivity is on its own out of time. It's a whole in time, instead of being, a togetherness, a relation. That is why I thought of it this way.
A kind of interruption, a point of interruption could be this point of the discontinuity. But then this will be a different concept of subjectivity. Interesting. I'm not denying this, but I mean, what we have in the history of the philosophy, on the contrary, it seems to me a strong proximity between time and subjectivity. But if we try to think in a different way, probably you're right.
But would that mean that it's still bound to time in some way, even if it is a disruption in time, it's still bound to time somehow?
Pardon, loud.
That even if it is a disruption in time, it's still bound to time because it's affecting something which is time.
But for instance, Benjamin seems to conceive decisive instance as interruptions, breaking something, breaking, not breaking time, breaking the continuity of time, because the instant is still time, but extracted from the continuity. For instance, Benjamin's idea of messianic time is not a negation of time, is a negation of the continuous, homogeneous model of time, so the representation of time as a line. This Benjamin is fighting when he introduces his model of messianic time as an interruption of this, as a break of this. He has a different concept of time. So perhaps what are you saying refers to an idea of time as the prevailing chronological model of linear time as we usually conceive of it. But if you conceive time as an instant interruption, then it is linked to subject, like she said, because then in that case subjectivity as an instantaneous consistence. It coincides with the instant.
A fleeting moment of subjectivity. But it's also an issue, you just mentioned this, that it's an issue of representation as well. Because like you say in infancy and history that we arrange our plan and our schedule according to, for example, Christmas. Or
according to
Christmas or Easter holidays. According to very trivial and human things. So perhaps subjectivity is the organization of time.
Disorganization. The organization or disorganization? Your perspective is the disorganization. It's anti-calendar, your perspective. No? But what you have in monasticism is this building on the contrary of, for instance, what will become the model of the liturgical year. A year, so the calendar of a year, each hour of this of the year acquires a meaning because it will correspond to a certain liturgical action, a certain prayer, a certain singing. No? Never forget, the monks sang a lot, and they read a lot. We will see. The problem, we'll see this tomorrow. The problem will become now the problem of liturgy, because what we have here is what we could now already anticipate, and we could call a liturgization, can we say that, of life. Life is liturgized in that way. It's not only regulated, because apparently it is regulated. No, it's not only